Now it is. Yeah.
It's come up.
This meeting has been recorded. By continuing your, do we have to press continue? Yeah.
Just got
Got
it.
it. Yeah.
Just got it.
Press got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, ladies. Mothers Union Diocese of Dublin and Glendalough 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence campaign runs from the 25th of November to the 10th of December. Today is day 3, Saturday the 27th of November, and our topic today is financial stress, Global Day of Action, no more 1 in 3. My name is Karen Nelson, and I am Diocesan President of Mothers Union Dublin and Glendalough Diocese. The United Nations 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence and Abuse is an annual international campaign. It is a rallying call to members of the Anglican Communion to act against gender-based violence. We are meeting today as part of Mothers Union's response to this call. In venues up and down the country, members are coming together in fellowship to raise awareness of the need to end gender-based violence in all forms and in all societies. We are calling to stop this scourge. So I welcome you this morning to our Zoom and thank you for joining us on the third of the 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence. Today, we talk about two things: financial distress and how it can affect society, and B, the impact of domestic violence on children. We focus particularly on the shocking statistic that 1 in 3 women will experience gender-based violence in their lifetime. This is the reason we are holding a 3-minute silence. As today is also the Global Day of Action, we have a speaker, Mary Kennedy, on the subject of the impact of domestic violence on children. And this will be followed by 3 minutes of silence at 1 p.m. to denote our commitment to no more 1 in 3 women suffering gender-based violence. And as today is the Global Day of Action, we will be joining many other groups who will also be holding the 3-minute silence between 1 and 1:03 p.m. So a reflection today. Protestant Aid and other charities receive applications that relate to a wide range of financial needs. They increasingly stem from situations of domestic abuse. Incidents have increased during the pandemic, and we are aware of circumstances where women have had to flee their homes in fear, often with their frightened children. Because this can occur suddenly, women and children are often left without funds, food, and changes of clothes, etc. And we attempt to assist them via their clergy or social workers. We have a Bible reading for today. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. John 10, verse 10. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. Matthew 25, verse 35. And now we'll have a prayer. We pray for those who are living in or close to poverty because of abuse, for the agencies and the Gardaí who work with women who have experienced this trauma, for the 1,000 plus families who contact Protestant Aid every year for assistance. We pray for those around the world who have little harvest to reap because of the failure of crops. We ask that what they lack will be supplied by others who have plenty. Help them to discern the best seeds to sow for a better harvest in the future. Righteous God, we ask for courage to speak up when we see injustice and stand beside those who are treated unfairly. Help us to live out your command and to love our neighbours as ourselves, putting their well-being before our own comfort. Poverty is not made by God. It is created by you and me when we don't share what we have. Mother Teresa of Calcutta, generous God, forgive us when we find excuses to not share our resources with those in hardship. And that's from the Wave of Prayer 2021. I hope you've all been managing to keep up with our prayers every day and the reflections in the prayer book that we have for the 16 days. So action for today. For many, food poverty is endemic. Pledge to make a food donation to one of your local food banks or at a supermarket collection point. And if you have any questions about where there would be a food bank, you could ask your rector or a social worker or Protestant Aid. Protestant Aid can be contacted through www.protestantaid.org. And of course, the Department of Social Protection at www.gov.ie. So now I would like to introduce our speaker, Mary Kennedy. Mary is a final year PhD student of social work policy in Trinity College Dublin. Her study title is Using the Adverse Childhood Experience Survey to Inform Service Development in a Social Care Organisation. And she's a practicing social worker for more than 10 years and currently works for TUSLA out of hours service. Mary has previously worked in mental health services and found that service users had experienced many adversities during childhood. So Mary, we welcome you and look forward to hearing what you have to say. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Karen. It's nice to meet you all, ladies. I wish I was talking about a nicer topic. Unfortunately, I'm not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the screen with you all, just so that you can see. Karen, can you allow me to share the screen? It says the host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure now how to.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I can see my share screen.
On the settings, you should be able to let me share the screen. So let's see. Let me just check. You might have to go back into your Zoom, open up an internet window and go back into this meeting, and it will have a box that says allow participants to share their screen. If you just tick that box.
You're getting complicated now, Mary.
No, it's the same. I've done this. I've made the same mistake myself, so don't worry. Let's see. I'll go into Zoom and see.
Karen, if you make Mary the host.
Oh yeah, you can make me a host as well. So that's a very good point. You can make me a host. So what you do is...
Yeah, no, I've had that here now. That won't stop the recording, no?
No, that should be fine.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, let's see, will it let me know? Yes, it will let me know. There you go. Thank you.
Jane.
Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to go back a bit. Okay. So I'm just going to minimize you all so I can see myself. Okay. So we all know that children develop their social, emotional, and behavioral cues from their parents and adults living in the home environment that they grow up in. So the child's home environment and the adults that live there. These cues have the potential to impact both positively and negatively on a child's outcomes, but they are not the only contributory factors. Adversities experienced during childhood can also have a lasting impact. Growing up in a household where a child is exposed to domestic violence is defined as an adverse childhood experience. So before I start talking about adverse childhood experiences, it's important to remember that an adversity simply means a difficult or unpleasant situation, or in other words, an obstacle to overcome. So the origin of the ACEs term, it started in a hospital called Kaiser Permanente in San Diego, California in the 1990s. And it was an obesity clinic. And there was a doctor there called Dr. Vincent Felitti. He's still alive, he's in his 90s now. He was running this program for people who were severely overweight. We're talking maybe 30 to 40 stone overweight. They were quite significantly very large people. And he was wondering why they were dropping out of the programs. What was happening was he was giving them bariatric surgery, and they were doing quite well for a period of time, losing hundreds of pounds worth of weight, and then all of a sudden they were dropping out. So he did interviews with 286 of them. And during the interview, he misspoke. He meant to ask someone how old they were when they first had a sexual relationship, but instead he asked them how much they weighed. And the response that he got from the lady in question was that she had weighed 2.5 stone, which is the average weight of a 4 to 5-year-old. So he was quite shocked by that. And he started to ask other participants in the clinic how old they were when they first had sexual relations. And what he found out was a high proportion of the people who dropped out of the clinic, who lost a significant amount of weight and then started to put it back on, had a high prevalence of sexual abuse histories during childhood. So what he started to realize was these people had a commonality in that they were using food as a coping mechanism for that negative experience. So what was happening was they were recalling what happened to them in childhood, and they were using food to help them regulate their emotions. His findings were quite significant, but they were dismissed due to low numbers. So what he did was he thought, I've really cottoned on to something here. I'm going to go around to these different seminars and I'm going to talk about them. When he went to the seminars, he was humiliated by other doctors who said that his numbers weren't comparative, that he needed higher numbers. So Dr. Felitti knew he needed help to validate the findings, and that's where Dr. Robert Anda and the Centers for Disease Control came in. So epidemiology is a branch of medicine which deals with the incidence, distribution, and possible control of diseases and other factors relating to health. So we've all heard about epidemiology because of COVID. So you'll hear a lot of epidemiologists talk about it, where it's coming from, how it's being distributed, how we're responding to it, and how it's impacting how many people it's impacting. So Dr. Robert Anda was the co-principal investigator of the first ACE study, and he was a medical epidemiologist. He worked in the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the USA. So you hear a lot about the CDC, also to do with COVID. One of the primary responsibilities of the CDC is to fight disease and support communities and American citizens to do the same. So the ACE study was the first time that an epidemiological approach had been undertaken to consider the impact of multiple childhood adversities on the frequency and pattern of health-related events. So up until that time, we did have other people who had investigated singular adversities. So we had Henry Kemp, who looked at physical abuse during childhood and how that impacted on children's outcomes. We've also had other people who looked at smoking and to look at how smoking in adolescence and into adults impacted people, but no one had ever looked at multiple adversities at the one time. So the information and public health advice that we're currently, I've already said that. So what it is about is epidemiology. What it looked at was the incidence. So how many people had been impacted by childhood adversities, distribution, who had been impacted and where, and the control, why were they impacted, and how do we reduce the numbers and combat the diseases that are caused by the adversities. So for some reason, epidemiology is not often mentioned in ACE's information sessions. So I'm sure some of you have heard about it, some of you may have not, but those of you who may have heard about it may have thought that it was a psychological research or a piece of qualitative research, whereas really it's important to remember that the ACE study was a scientific piece of research. It was completed by a multidisciplinary team in a clinical setting. Okay, so the first ACE study was epidemiological and longitudinal. So longitudinal means it happened over a significant period of time. It was undertaken by the Center for Disease Control and Kaiser Permanente. So that was the private hospital in San Diego that Dr. Felitti worked in. The first phase happened in '95. There was 17,337 participants, and it's important to note that these participants were middle class, college educated, 80% of them are white, and they had private health insurance. So why I point that out is it's important. It was the first time really that adversities and outcomes have been looked at in a middle class population. So it wasn't about poverty, it wasn't about financial circumstance. It was about anyone who experienced adversities across a class range could be impacted by them. So it was significant in that regard. So the study examined the relationship of childhood abuse and household dysfunction to many of the leading causes of deaths in adults. So what ACEs did the study examine and why? So the ACEs fell under different categories. So you'll see the three pictures here. The first category was childhood abuse. So they asked three questions. They asked if people had experienced psychological, physical, and/or sexual abuse. It also looked at neglect. It looked at whether people had experienced physical and/or emotional neglect during childhood. Now, the first phase of the ACE study looked at household dysfunction, and the first time they asked about it, they only asked about violence against a mother. Since dissemination of the first study findings in 1998, people have now started to ask about domestic violence in the home. So not based on a gender, but whether the child had experienced domestic violence of any nature in their home of any gender. Household dysfunction, that topic, also looked at whether the child experienced substance misuse, mental illness or suicidality, incarceration of a family member, and/or parental divorce or abandonment as an adversity during childhood. So these 10 ACEs were chosen simply because they were the most common adversities reported by those in Dr. Folletti's first study in the obesity clinic. So it's important to note that the patients who took part in that preliminary study were again middle class, college educated, white, and had private health insurance, because it's going to be very interesting now, ladies, when we look at the findings. So what did the ACE study find? So the ACE study found that in the absence of poverty, so all these people had financial means, they had college educations, they had opportunities available to them, but if they had experienced adversities, that they still experience negative outcomes. So more than 50% had at least one adversity during childhood. 25% had 2 or more ACEs, and respondents with 4 or more ACEs were 4 to 12 times more likely to experience alcohol abuse, drug misuse, depression, and suicide attempts. They were 2 to 4 times more likely to smoke, self-report poor health, have 50 or more sexual partners, and to encounter sexually transmitted infections. And they were also 1.4 to 1.6 times more likely to be physically inactive and severely obese. Respondents' health-harming behaviours such as alcohol abuse, drug misuse, overeating, smoking, etc., were identified as coping mechanisms. So unlike Dr. Folletti's first study, they also looked at other coping mechanisms, and alcohol abuse and drug misuse, overeating and smoking were some of those. ACEs alone did not lead to negative health outcomes, but those with ACEs and who adopted these health-harming behaviours to cope with the ACEs increased their probability of experiencing them. So that means that just because you have 4+ ACEs doesn't mean that you're predetermined to experience negative outcomes. It means that you have to adopt a health-harming behaviour, or other things have to happen for that to really lead to a negative outcome. So it established a relationship between experiencing ACEs, health-harming behaviours, and ischemic heart disease, cancer, chronic lung disease, skeletal fractures, and liver disease. There was a dose-response relationship. So in layman's terms, that means the higher the number of your ACEs, the higher the probability that you're going to experience negative outcomes. So it also established that asking about ACEs were okay. So before that, professionals hadn't asked people in clinical settings about their adversities during childhood. Subsequent ACE studies, so the ACE studies that came after, and there's been many, we're talking, I think there's about 10,000, over 10,000 now, have legitimized the original study findings. So across the globe in various settings, they're finding the same things. So subsequent studies have also started to expand the ACEs knowledge base. So the basic premise of the seminal, so the first and the subsequent ACE studies, is that ACEs increase the probability of experiencing negative outcomes across the lifespan. So now we're going to look at what we know about the probable negative outcomes for children who encounter this ACE. So again, it's about, this is not inevitable. So there will be some people sitting here today who will have experienced domestic violence. Some of us will have, and we will know people who've experienced domestic violence as children who are exposed to it. That doesn't mean that you encounter negative outcomes. It just increases the probability for people of doing so. So the health impact of domestic violence. So exposure to domestic violence during childhood increases the adult's probability of developing chronic pain, neurological disorders, respiratory diseases, gastrointestinal disease, metabolic disorders, so stroke, high blood pressure, diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, and cancer. The risk of being diagnosed with these conditions in adulthood is compounded when the adult experienced both child victimization and exposure to domestic violence. So basically, where they not only saw and experienced others being abused, but they were also abused themselves. Children who witness domestic violence have been found to have higher rates of psychological problems throughout childhood. So it's not just about the physical impact, it's also about the psychological and the mental health impact. And exposure to domestic violence has been found to increase the likelihood of depressive symptoms in school-aged children and has been strongly linked to experiencing childhood depression. So the social impact of domestic violence on children. So parents who experienced interpersonal violence as children or adults are probabilistically more likely to be re-exposed to additional interpersonal violence across their lifespan, and they are at greater risk for disrupted parenting sensitivity with subsequent cascading negative effects on their children's development. So that basically means that their children will experience more negative outcomes as they grow up. Mothers who experience parent-child aggression during childhood have been found to be at higher risk of encountering domestic violence in their adult relationships. In addition to this, they have also been found to have an increased risk of having a child with behaviour problems. Adolescents exposed to domestic violence in their family of origin during childhood have been found to be more accepting of violence in their adult intimate relationships. And children who witness domestic violence in their families have been found to be lonelier and to encounter more peer problems and conflict in general than other children. The emotional impact. So exposure to domestic violence has been found to result in a range of negative and overwhelming emotions for young children. Domestic violence exposure has been linked to creating a current disrupting impact on the dynamics in families, which undermines the security and containment young children need to manage and process their emotions. So that basically means that if you grow up in a home where there's domestic violence, it's very hard for your parents to teach you how to regulate your emotions, or to teach you how to respond to fear if they feel afraid themselves, or to respond to anger if they are always angry themselves. So exposure to domestic violence results in a disruption to the care available for children, reducing opportunities for communication and collaboration and decision-making, forcing divided loyalties, disrupting routines and predictability, and reducing parents' capacity to provide containment and security for children. Research indicates that whilst domestic violence is ongoing, children experience repeated emotional distress and family dynamics continue to be disrupted, meaning that children are left with inadequate coping strategies and ultimately therefore become overwhelmed. So the behavioural impact of domestic violence. So domestic violence has been linked to aggressive behaviours in children. These aggressive behaviours are more likely to occur when a child is exposed to domestic violence, encounters poor parenting, and has low self-esteem. So it's not just exposure to domestic violence that causes a child to behave aggressively. There's a whole list of other factors that are at play. Exposure to domestic violence is associated with greater externalizing behavior in children. So temper tantrums, arguing with others, aggression towards people, objects, and disobeying rules and requests. And depending on the child's age, this could be because they don't know how to articulate how they're feeling, or it could be they don't know any other way to articulate how they're feeling. Okay, so as they get older, you see it in adolescence. It can be a learned behaviour. It can also be because they don't have a way to communicate their emotions, so they act out. Exposure to domestic violence during the first 3 years of life is associated with an increased risk of exhibiting aggressive behaviours at age 5 and 9 years. And adolescents who are exposed to domestic violence during childhood have been found to have a greater risk of perpetrating physical dating violence, bullying, and sexual harassment. So that's the true impact of what's happening for children. And that's the end of my presentation. If anyone has any questions, I'm just going to stop sharing the screen. Stop share. There we go.
Can you just remind me of what the ACE letters stand for? I understand it, but just those 3 letters. What do
Okay, it's adverse childhood experience.
Oh, it's very simple. Thank you very much.
Adverse childhood experience. It's also a medical term, so anyone from a medical field, it's something to do with medicine as well. I used to always hear it in the hospital, but I can't
Right.
remember what the medical term is.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else? Any questions? No? Okay.
Thanks, Mary.
Thanks, Ron.
Yeah, you know, in terms of, I mean, working in social work, and for me, for a long time, I've kind of rummaged through, you know, coming across adults who would be manifesting with different types of chronic diseases. And because I'm opportuned within an MDT to undertake, you know, psychosocial assessments, so you know, we can actually formulate that, you know, adverse experiences, even in adults, young adult life, middle age, impacts on their current health status, you know. So I think there's a correlation between adverse impact and how domestic violence impacts on, especially women.
Mm-hmm.
Are you aware of any study? Are you aware of any similar parallel study in relation to adverse experiences and impact on health status in later life?
Ladies, sorry, can I just interrupt there for a minute? We've just gone past 1 o'clock. Can we just have a minute silence? And then we can continue with the conversation afterwards, if you don't mind. Is that all right?
Yep, fine.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just start. We'll do 1 minute silence now because it's just after 1. Thank you, ladies, for that. We actually did 2 minutes silence there. I don't know if any of you have ever sat in church and done, I can't remember what it's called now, where you might have a quiet afternoon prayer, and you sit there for 2 or 3 hours so quietly, and it is very profound when you walk out and you have actually managed to keep your mouth shut for 3 hours and the thoughts, just be with your own thoughts. So at least giving 2 minutes silence to and thinking about women and those who have been affected by gender violence, I think it was good for us to do it. So sorry now, Rom and Mary, if you want to continue with your conversation. I presume, ladies, you're all right just to stay on. If anybody needs to leave, please feel free to go if you have to.
So Ron, you were asking me about, is there any studies that I'm aware of that looks at the outcomes? There's actually quite a lot. Ireland's quite behind. So I found your conversation at the start, Karen, where you spoke about Protestant Aid and about how a lot of people are trying to help women and children who are fleeing from domestic violence situations with practical supports like clothes, food, and furniture, things that they basically need. What we're finding in Ireland is Wales, Scotland, the UK, the States, and parts of the Nordic region of Europe, they've all adopted adverse childhood experiences. They're all integrating it into their service provision. The UN have done a number of studies in Poland and Latvia, Lithuania. They did a collaborative study where they looked at outcomes for people who had experienced adversities in the later stages of their lives. And they found that domestic violence and alcohol abuse, there was a direct link, which we're all aware of. We all know that one of the common things that we find with domestic violence and family homes is that there's some form of addiction that's influencing the behaviour or contributing to it. What I found in Scotland and Wales is that they've changed their approach to service provision. So what they're doing is they're integrating information about ACEs into their social welfare systems. They're trying to ensure that people have their social determinants of health met. So I'm not sure if everyone knows what a social determinant of health is. Basically the conditions in where we live and grow and work, and to ensure that they are conducive to good health. And in Ireland, we're not doing that. So in Ireland, the route that we're taking with ACEs is we're ignoring adverse childhood experiences and we're going straight to this trauma-informed approach, which isn't a bad thing. I think being trauma-informed is very important. So trauma-informed means that we're recognising that people who experience adversities may have encountered them as trauma. So someone who's grown up in a home where there's been significant domestic violence may feel that they have been traumatised. Some people will, some people won't. It's very subjective. It's up to the person. So ACEs have kind of branched where some people are looking at social determinants of health. That's what we should do. And other people are gone in trauma-informed approaches and they're forgetting about the basic stuff. So they're forgetting about, it doesn't matter if I have trauma if I don't have a roof over my head. It doesn't matter if I have trauma if I don't have enough food on the table. It doesn't matter if I have trauma and I've nowhere to go if I'm still being abused. The only time I can deal with my trauma is when I have a roof over my head, I have food in my belly, I'm able to go to school, and I have the conditions to be healthy. So I find it really refreshing that that's what you ladies are talking about, because that's what people in domestic violence situations need as a primary concern. So thanks, Ron. That's a very interesting question. You should look at Mark Bellis. So Bellis. He's a very well-known ACE researcher in Wales, and he's done significant amount of work on longitudinal studies looking at the impact of ACE on the population in Wales. So Scotland has been found to be kind of similar to Ireland in that they have a high dependency on alcohol to respond to their adversities. So, any other questions?
Mary, can I ask you something? Obviously, times change and people change, and a number of us here, including myself, would be in an older age group. I mean, I'm in my 70s now, and when I was a child, it was perfectly normal for children to be physically punished. I don't mean beaten, but slapped or, you know, and we didn't feel that we were traumatized because we were slapped. And then in turn, when we had our own children, we probably dished out a certain amount of physical punishment. Then again, not extreme violence, but there was a physical element involved. To what extent do you think that carries, how many generations do you think that carries on to? I mean, obviously my children don't smack their children now because in today's, it's not an acceptable thing. How long does it take for that to work its way out of our mentality?
Well, it's a very interesting question, Patricia, and I'm a child of the 80s, and I got a slap on the backside for being bold as well, and I don't feel traumatized. But I think Ron will tell you as a social worker, it's about the fear. So it's about whether you're afraid of the person hitting you. So when I got a slap on the bum, it was because I was bold, and it wasn't that I was afraid, it was that I was being punished for what I did wrong. And they do see an intergenerational link between adversities passing down through the generations. And it's all to do with the pathways to negative outcomes. So it's to do with, there's a lot of scientific terminology that I'm not even going to try and explain to you, and epigenetic modulation. Have you heard about this toxic stress thing? Toxic stress, yeah, toxic stress. They're talking about when kids are living under a constant feeling that they're under threat, or that they have to be hyper vigilant, that it impacts the way your body works. And in the long term, that really compounds your negative outcomes. So if you as a parent are aggressive and abusive to your children, and your children learn that they should smack their children, it's really the person that decides how they behave. So your children might, and I'm not saying your children, Patricia, I mean children in general, but if my parents hit me and I was afraid of them, I then make a decision as a person whether I'm going to hit my children. So I can stop it straight away by saying that's not how I want to parent. But if I lived in a very chaotic environment and I had no positive people, so one of the things that they found counteracts the negative impact of ACEs is having one good adult. So I'm sure you know about this in your groups. Like, you're probably trying to be people's one good adult. A child needs one good adult that sees them positively no matter what they do. So whether they fail at school, whether they win the race, whether they're cheeky, whether they're nice, whether they're kind, whether they're unkind, that there's one good adult that always sees them in a positive light, still disciplines them, but doesn't punish them for making mistakes. So normally where we find that abuse doesn't repeat itself or cycles don't occur is where the person has good social determinants of health, and also where they have positive adult role models, where there's at least one good adult. And it doesn't have to be in the family. It can be a teacher, it can be someone from your church, it can be a community person, it can be a sports coach. It's just one person that follows you through your childhood that you can go to and say, you know, I did well at this, or I'm having difficulties with this. And they always have that look in their eye, like, I'm really happy to see you. You know, you matter. So it is possible to change behavior with the first generation. But if you don't, if things don't change and those maintaining factors continue, then the behavior will continue, which is the sad thing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Well, Mary, I'm very happy to hear you say that as a group here today, when I was talking to you earlier, we seem to be doing the right thing, because as a group, Mothers Union offers practical help, and that is where we support women's refuges. And it's just, that's where we support communities, that's where we work. So it's great to know that we're having an impact and we're doing the right thing, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's what we need a lot more of. I think if Ireland was to embrace, so the ACE now is what we call an evidence base. So it's an evidence base of scientific research. So we really fully embraced that into our social policies. We really looked at how adversities during childhood lead to negative outcomes, lead to people ending up in prison, lead to people ending up dying. I think it's 10 years earlier. If you have 4+ ACEs, you'll die 10 years earlier. If we really start to look at how we structure our society, it will cost a lot of money. And I think that we haven't embraced that because of the money it will cost. Because someone else said there, which I found really interesting, poverty doesn't happen. Poverty happens because we don't share what we have. Yeah, that's exactly it. If we don't give people what they need to survive and to do better, then they're not going to survive and do better. They're not. So that was really interesting as well.
I think one of the things that Mothers Union promotes well in a lot of areas are the parenting courses, but often you don't really necessarily reach the people that really are in need of them, but at the same time I think they're very important. And as the whole idea of accepting the child as they are and not being on the judgmental side is a great help to mothers and fathers, of course, too. It's a parenting course, not just for mothers, but often it's the mothers who attend. So we need more of them. We need more trained people who can help, because in this diocese have been trying to promote it, and there aren't enough. You're dependent on one person at the moment to deliver the courses, so.
So you actually have someone that does a parenting course in your group, do you? That's really good.
Well, yes, we do.
Yeah.
We do, yes. And we have delivered as many as we can with that one person. So it's been good, and some of them have come back. We've maybe delivered one, maybe that would be for the younger children age groups, and then those parents have come back when their children have reached teenage years. So we have delivered those as well for parents of teenagers. And in this day and age, it's not easy. It's not easy for young people, and particularly, of course, at the moment, and of course, everything's suspended at the minute anyway, So yes, we do our best.
Heather was preparing to deliver a parenting course just at the start of COVID, if I remember correctly. It was in April, wasn't it? We were all set up.
Yes, yeah.
Nothing.
Well, no, we had to suspend things, but still, hopefully we'll get going again. Because I really feel it's very important, even though I'm of the older generation and have my grandchildren, but still, it's really important that parents can get together and not feel alone in their difficulties. It's only one aspect of helping people get through life, if you like, and the different stages, and being aware of so many influences that there are on young children, and how our behavior and our hang-ups are passed on without us often realizing what we're doing in the way we are. So we need to work on ourselves too.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for your presentation. It was really great.
Thank you.
Very, very informative and helpful.
Were you going to say something? I see Jess and John. I could see your mouth moving.
Yes, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, no, I was very struck by what you said, Mary. We had 2 children in foster care 20 years ago, just in temporary for 10 months, and they went on to a wonderful foster home. But by the time they came to us, prison and drugs had already featured in their lives, say 2.5 and 6-year-old. And they went on to an amazing couple who kept them, but life hasn't been very good to them since. And the girl died at 23 last year. She'd had two kids. But the little girl is now seeing foster parents who had her, which is wonderful. But it is so difficult. They just had so much to cope with. It was just too much. The boy in particular, I don't think he really ever settled. And life, I think, has been quite hard for him since. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry to hear that. You're clearly impacted by that. And I think
well, it was amazing to hear. It's just also true what you said, of course.
It's, to be honest with you, it's Jess, is it? Jess is your name, Jess. I'm going to be honest, and Ron will laugh at me, but I've been a social worker for 10 years, and before that I did social care, and God, I was very judgmental. Like, I'd meet these people and I'd be like, just don't do that. Why are you doing that? Stop doing that. Stop doing it. And then what happened was about I was working in mental health, working in St. Patrick's, the mental health hospital. I was there for about 7 or 8 years. And I was seeing the same thing time and time again. I was seeing the same story, the same pattern of sexual abuse, the same pattern of neglect, emotional neglect, physical abuse. I wasn't seeing as much incarceration of parents because it was a different social profile, but I was seeing a lot of mental illness of parents in the family, and it was the same thing. What started to happen was they developed mental health difficulties, then they'd start to develop cancer, then there was smoking and drinking. Even with the privilege and the opportunities that they still had the same health harming behaviours. And what happened was I did this child protection welfare course in Trinity, and I met this really nice man called Trevor Spratt. He's now my PhD supervisor. Are any of you aware of Trevor? He's lovely, lovely, lovely man. he started talking about ACEs and it really struck me. So I said, okay, I really want to do a study on this. And when I started doing the study, I became a nicer person. I'm a nicer person now because I now look at people where they're really challenging me and I think, is this about you or is this about me? What's happened for you that you're behaving like this? And how am I causing you to be worse? What am I doing? So it's made me a nicer person as a social worker, and it's made me a nicer person as a person because I have more of a sense of humanity. So the one thing I would say to you is, if you haven't read about the ACE, because you all have humanity, because that's coming across overwhelmingly from this meeting, I can see it, rest assured, I know that you're all human and you have heart, but if you haven't read up about it, do read up about it, because it is really interesting and it will help you understand the world a bit better. It really has helped me anyway, and I feel like I'm a better person because of it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Mary. That's a very interesting point where you said that you were thinking about when you were being judgmental, and you were saying, why are you doing this? And, you know, stop doing this. And then when you did your investigation, that you realized that you needed to look at it differently, and it made you realize things in a different way. So yeah, maybe we all need to take a step back and look at things a little bit differently. That it's not about us, it's about them. Or, you know, if there's a person that you know who's maybe got behavioral issues or something, we need to realize and step back and say, well, you know, where is this coming from? Instead of kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, you know, it's about kind of understanding that parents are doing the best they can with the information that they have. And just because we can't fathom why they're doing it, there's a reason why they're doing it. And it's because society failed them, and society didn't intervene, and society didn't give them what they needed. And by society, I mean everybody, not just social workers, because we only work within the system that's provided for us. And I think people sometimes forget that. People need a good, solid home base. They need proper food, proper medication, proper health system, proper education, proper supports. They need parenting supports from the minute they get pregnant. They don't need it when the child is old enough. They need it from the minute they get pregnant. And we as a society need to change our approach to that. And we need to make sure the children, regardless of where they're born or who they're born to, have good outcomes. And until we do that, we're failing as a society. Children who should get better. So
sorry, just one thing based on your last comments now. Would you say that the housing situation in the past few years, where you have children living through the homeless system, I'm sure a lot of us know the conditions in these homeless systems. So are we looking at at an Irish pandemic of chronic health, manifestation down the line? Because, a lot of children, a lot of parents are experiencing adverse and severe conditions as we speak. So down the line, we're not even only looking at domestic violence, which is also, an ingredient of the homelessness, but, the adverse situations that people face now. So are we looking at an Irish, health pandemic down the line?
So basically, to be adverse childhood experience, there was originally 10, the ones that I listed, but those are just what we call research measures. So research measure is basically a question. So it's a question. So there's many ACEs, but we just haven't researched them. And why people go with those 10 is because they've been validated. So they've been asked, they've been examined, they capture the information, and it's easy for researchers just to use those 10 questions. So what you're talking about, Rom, is growing up in a hotel room or spending a period of time longer than a week in a hotel room as a child could have an impact on you growing up. And that could be considered to be an ACE, but until someone does research around the impact of that, we won't know if that's a valid ACE. But and we all know as women, or even as women, if you live in a room with your 3 kids and a man, it's highly unlikely that people are not going to get angry and irritable in that situation in one room. where you've no cooking facilities and you've one bathroom and you've 2 beds to fit 4 or 5 people, of course people are going to get irritable. Of course they're going to get angry. The kids aren't going to have enough room to play. They're not going to have enough room to explore. People are not going to have enough space to be able to maintain their mental wellness. So that is going to be a huge adversity. And it is going to lead to negative outcomes down the line, because developmental milestones will be impacted. So when you think about a newborn baby learning to walk, talk, and explore in a tiny room with other people, it's not. They need space, they need to live, they need to experience different things. And I think as a society, we're kind of giving out about people, you know, living in hotel rooms and why are they having these kids? Well, number one, because that's what they do. And there's no point getting annoyed at the children now that it's born, like the child is here. So there's no point getting annoyed at the child or punishing the child. It's about what could we have done to stop that from happening, or to ensure that when that child was born, they had a better situation to live in. And I don't think we're making that connection. I think we're just getting angry and we're not coming up with anything to solve it. We should have more social housing. We should. My dad's always saying, in his day and age, and my dad's a child of the 50s, and he's saying people lived in social housing, but they all had jobs. They worked in factories, they worked for different people. Now we've no jobs for people who want to do menial labour or don't have college education, and we've no homes for them either. And not everyone has the abilities to be college educated or has the opportunities to do so. And some people just want to do those sorts of jobs. That's fine for them. So they should be facilitated as well. I'm sorry, I get very passionate about this stuff because I do think we're just missing the basic understanding of it. Just give people the basic things that they need and they will do better. They will do better. Some people won't because it's not part of their plan, but most people will. If you just meet their basic needs, they'll do better and their children will do better.
Can I just come in on something? Gloria Proby, I live in Inch, Corey, County Wexford. It just, you're bringing in something back into my mind. 44 years ago, when I had my 3rd child, he ended up in Temple Street, and for his last feed at night, you had to go down a little alleyway to get into the hospital to feed him, and it was, you had to go literally past A&E, the children's A&E in Temple Street. And I got talking to one of the nurses, quite an old nurse at the time, and I just can't believe so many little children all here. Like, how have they been hurt? How are they 1 o'clock in the morning? Like, why are they here waiting to be, what's the problem? Surely to goodness they would have been in bed long time ago. And she said, no, they live in the flats all around here. She said, some of these children that I know are even 3rd generation now, because the mums got pregnant before they were probably 16. Then the next children got pregnant before they were 16. They were all living in the same kind of area. They had the same problems. And this nurse was, I suppose we had time to talk, it was in the middle of the night, and she just said, she was actually quite sad, or very sad, because she said, like, I don't know what we're going to do about all of this. This is just repeat. So I suppose what you're saying is, you know, try and get the young mums when they're very young, or even the older mums, I suppose, education. I know Darndale, again, I'm listening to people who know about Darndale, you know, introducing a boiled egg on a Monday morning with toast. These children have never had a boiled egg because they maybe bowl of cereal or something. So I don't know, it's been going on so long, and I think probably in Ireland maybe a little bit worse than other countries, I'm not quite sure. But and this, on a positive thing, on a personal thing, I have a middle grandchild who's always been a little bit naughty, very clever, like he will probably you know, argue black as white with a really good argument. And about a year ago, I suddenly kind of felt there's a need somewhere here. And I've actually stopped thinking of being as naughty, and I've actually praised him for all little things. And, you know, if there's something, when we go to church, he writes down all our names, not the older brother who always takes charge. He does it, and he's so proud of himself. Small little things, I think, to give praise is something that we as grandparents or parents, sometimes we forget about it, because his attitude to me has really changed. He kind of looks up, you know, and he kind of does things now when we say, oh, that's brilliant, good man. You know, it's, I don't know, small things, but just, that's a personal thing.
And it sounds like he has you, like you're his, he probably has multiple good adults. He has
He has brilliant parents, absolutely brilliant parents, but middle child, clever. Just, there's a little, you know, there's sometimes they just need a little bit of, I don't know, praise. And he does get praise, but there was just something I just noticed, and I think he used to get attention from being naughty instead of just
Kids are very resourceful. They get the attention whatever way they can. But no, you make a very good point. You are correct in what you're saying. And I think a lot, because we're all women here and we're talking about gender-based violence. So really gender is huge in that a lot of us probably encounter the outcomes, and we haven't reached our full outcome because we haven't reached the end of our lives yet. But as we're on our journey to our outcomes, it's probably because we knew there was potential, and we knew there was possibilities, and we knew there were opportunities. And I'm sure, Ron, I'm sure you'll agree with me, Ron, a lot of the girls that I meet in Tusla don't know that there's possibilities. They don't know that there's opportunities. And the boys as well, because if they've lived in the same environment that their parents grew up in, if they've done the same things that their parent did, if they're exposed to the same dysfunction, they don't know any different. They don't know that there is different out there. They don't know that they can be the exception, or that they can be the first to lead people to a different way. They don't know. And the people that do try to do it then sometimes face resistance. But once someone sees someone taking an opportunity or trying something different, they follow suit. But I suppose it comes with the privilege of having a secure, stable upbringing, or not even that, but having someone who showed you that possibility was there, that there was an opportunity to do something different. We take for granted that everyone has that, and they don't have that.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that's true, Mary. And what you said brings me back to Peter McVerry, Father Peter McVerry. He would have been the positive model, that male adulthood would have been there for children, children from North Inner City up to Ballymun, and a lot. I've met some of them who would have testified to Peter being that person in their lives, and through him they've been able to break that cycle, because they, to break that cycle of intergenerational disadvantage and a lot of domestic violence. Domestic violence also is a common theme. Gender-based violence is a common theme that I have observed from people in that cohort. So what you said really rings true, but I'm thinking in my head, good, your study is good, it's introducing. Is that introduced in assessments as social workers, particularly in child and family? Are they trained in that as social workers in adoption, or staff in departments of welfare and social protection? Are they trained? Are they trained to understand, the pathway or the pathology of how people currently present, and how their, early life adverse experiences are affecting them?
No, Ron, as I said, so what's happened is the UK, Scotland, Wales, they've gone down the route of adverse childhood experience, and they've adopted the need to become trauma aware as well. But they're more so saying we need to address the adversities and stop them from happening in the first place. We need to intervene. Whereas Ireland hasn't adopted this. We don't. No, Tusla has no training. And Tusla shows a video. It's called Resilience, the Biology of Stress and the Resilience of Hope. but that in itself isn't training. They're doing a lot of trauma-informed training, but again, that doesn't explain adversities and it doesn't help people with the adversity in the first place. So I'm like a broken record. I'm giving out about it to everyone. I tried to set up a group with the ISAW about ACEs, but I couldn't get people to participate. I couldn't. People wanted to come to meetings like this, but they didn't want to take responsibility for disseminating the information or for being the kind of passion behind it. So we're slow. I'm hoping we will, but again, it's going to cost a lot of money. It will cost the government a lot of money to put things right, and I don't know how keen. It would take a very, very brave government to take it on, and we'd be very grateful to them. But as they're saying, we might have Sinn Féin in the next. I don't know if they'd be willing to do it. I don't think Fine Gael would. I don't think Fianna Fáil would. So we need a new revolutionary political party that would be open to trying something a bit different. You know, maybe you could consider that, ladies. Would you consider branching into politics?
Oh my goodness.
I vote for you.
No way. No way.
Well, ladies,
I adore you.
can I just say, I think we should wrap it up now. We've been here for 1 hour and 10 minutes. We were only supposed to do 35 minutes maybe. So it's been very interesting, and it's been great to speak to you, Mary, and hear what you had to say. And thank you, ladies, for all your questions. I think that also helped bring us down a different avenue and just open our minds a little bit more and remind us of things that we need to do and to look at people maybe a little bit differently. So
thank you for organising it, Karen, and thank you, Mary. That was great.
Thank you, Mary.
Really appreciated it.
Well, keep up the good work. You're doing great work. I'm delighted. You've refreshed me on a Saturday morning.
That's
So-
good.
Mary.
Can we-
Okay, I'll leave you
Bye-bye.
be.
thank you,
Look
thank
after
you, Mary.
yourselves later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Mary, can
Bye-bye,
you-
everybody.
Again, please.
Can I say again?
Can you just make me the host again?
Oh yeah, of course. Who made me the host?
Karen.
Karen. Heather, can you make her the host again rather than me?
No,
'Cause
it's not
my
me.
end-
It's Karen.
Karen. Can you unhost?
Nelson.
Who did it?
Who
I-
made me the host?
I did. Maybe so. Maybe I don't have to.
Because if I end, am I going to end for everyone?
Well, that's
Oh,
what I'm
no,
afraid
please don't
of.
end this.
Let's see.
If she leaves, everybody goes.
Yeah, if I leave, so if I'm still the host, does it say I'm still the host?